Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I feel good. Let's talk about extremely long and dense fantasy books. Graham, you've talked about this before. Yes, I have, and I will say much about it again. Last year I read The Silmarillion. I broke it down with the 5-minute Silmarillion series over on the Substack. Just a reminder, if you're subscribed to the stack, everything goes behind a paywall after 6 months. It's like a rolling thing. And I'm pretty sure I finished the last of those in October or so. As we get to then, April, those will probably all be paywalled. Like I said, I will eventually get them done in video form, so they'll be here. But if you're one of the very few paying subscribers that I have, you can still access that stuff. But I am now doing the 5-minute Witchy War, and that is why I have been rereading Witchy Eye, a book that, now that I do the count, I have read on an average of every 2 years since it came out in 2017. This Wednesday, which is the 26th, the very first of those 5-minute pieces will drop, kind of giving an introduction to the series and what it is. So if you want to grab a book, like grab a copy and read along, I'll be posting those once a week for a couple of weeks. There are 29 chapters in the first book, and I'm doing the summaries in like 5-chapter chunks. It isn't like the Silmarillion where each post was 1 chapter. So for the next 6 weeks or so, I'll do the first book. And then I'm going to wait a couple of weeks before jumping into the second one, just so that people have some time to kind of digest and process, because this is an incredibly dense book. On this reading, as I work my way through the first couple of chapters, I'm actually pausing to do research on stuff that I never looked up before. And it got me thinking about what makes this book kind of challenging to the lay and casual fantasy reader. And it reminds me of other books that I've attempted to get through at different times. And they took me a couple of times to see through to the end. The first time I tried reading Dune was in 2017, and I didn't quite make it to the halfway point. There were parts of it that I thought were cool, and other parts where it's just like, all right, I don't know what the heck he's referencing here. There's a lot of just him talking about stuff that isn't explained, and I wasn't following along, and so I put it down. I tried it again 4 years later, and in that time I had digested a lot more nonfiction, and I was just kind of able to process a lot more, we'll say, complex ideas, especially with regard to a long view of history. And that made Dune make more sense, because from a 30,000 foot view, that's kind of what Frank Herbert was writing about, was the cyclical nature of human behavior throughout history and what attempts to corral and control that have looked like. Through several different lenses. I think he should have only written Dune in that series, although I enjoyed Messiah and Children of Dune. He was asking a lot of broad questions and challenging the reader to answer them and to defend their own answer. But the farther he gets down the rabbit hole, the more narrow those answers become. And you see him kind of providing his own. I was like, yeah, I think this book had more value when it was openly challenging the reader and forcing them to provide the conclusions of the discussion. But I digress. Nevertheless, on that second reading of Dune, I was able to get what he was saying. And on this fourth reading of Witchy Eye, I'm still learning the things that he's referencing. Pacing-wise and concept-wise, it is a pretty conventional fantasy story. An otherwise unassuming main character finds out that she's really got some special ancestry and lineage that comes with responsibilities attached, and there are bad people after her, and she needs to go on the run. All of that is stuff that we've seen done several times, but the way that it's done and the sandbox that it's playing in is the real variant on this. I also got to thinking about Empire of Silence, the first of the Sun Eater books by Christopher Rocchio. he's had tremendous success with those since the first one came out in 2018, I think. And I think I've read Empire of Silence at least twice, maybe 3 times. And the other ones, like, man, it is like chopping down an entire forest with just a hatchet to work your way through the complexity and the sheer mass of these books. The conceit of them is that it's kind of a deathbed confession of a man who's 1,000 years old, and you're given to understand right out of the gate that he destroyed an entire solar system and all of the civilizations orbiting it, and that he was right to do so. And this series is the long explanation as to how and why. He also just recently announced, Rockio did, I guess, the release date for the 7th book. The 6th one came out late 23, early 24. I don't know. Like, he's a very consistent producer and an extremely hard worker. And this is a series with a massive scope that, much like the Witchy Eye books, stands up to multiple readings, which is great. There are times when somebody with my attention span who enjoys thrillers and more succinct narratives struggles to get into books like this. But Rockio was a big fan of DUNE and other similar properties, and he's got kind of that similar sensibility as Herbert. He's able to sit in a high orbit and look at cyclical human behaviors and institutions over time and write about that. This is a series that I can't even remember how many thousands of years it is into the future. I believe that Earth is lost, even though mankind is spread out into the stars. They don't really do the whole warp speed thing. They've got cryosleep and other advanced technologies, but space is just big. It's easy to get lost in the black. There's some metaphysical stuff going on. There are dangerous alien races and such. But much like DUNE, even though it's extremely far in the future, it is connected to our world and to our species, and it's saying things about the timeless qualities of the human race. Witchy War is an alternate history fantasy that it plays with real-world figures in our history, but also inserts some fictional ones and bounces ideas off of them. He's playing in the other direction with various iterations of biblical lore. The reason that I get into books like these and series like this, and why I've struggled to maintain my interest in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, is because of that connection to our world and the very real and borderline tangible link to what it's saying about what we've done with our world and our timeline and our substance as the human species. The Cosmere very explicitly does not have Earth in it. There's something about that provides a barrier to me with investing in it, to the extent that Sanderson kind of requires of his readers. This last Stormlight Archive book that came out was 1,300 pages. I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of words that is. Witchy Eye is like 600 pages, 500 something. It's 200,000 words. It's a massive tome, and every time I've read it, it's taken me a lot of time to get through it. But Wu-Dang, it's provided something a little bit more real into the ground, whereas I've got to 100% completely pretend that there's a relatable value in the Stormlight books if I get through them, and that they're somehow more than the pleasant, distracting fantasy that other works of his have purported to be. He's still writing your human characters, and there are qualities that I can sympathize with, but the fact that it's all completely disconnected and fictional and doesn't have anything to say about anything that I'm connected to in my life right now has had a lot to do with why I just don't want to immerse myself in it. Yeah, but Graham, you read the Silmarillion again. There are very strong echoes of spiritual truths in the Silmarillion, and I also appreciate what Tolkien was trying to write about and why. And there's also a lot to be said about the fact that he didn't publish the Silmarillion. He was writing it for himself. He didn't put it out there for everybody to consume and argue over. That's what Christopher did. And I'm glad that he did. I don't think it's a mistake that I finally took a scalpel to my copy of the Silmarillion and read it cover to cover right around the same time that I was reading Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures, his unpublished works. I kind of get the same thing out of them. An insight into the mind of a writer who had something very real to say about the life that he lived, and by extension, the life that I'm living now. I know Sanderson is trying to write his truth into the Stormlight books, and that's gone in a direction that just doesn't really resonate with me. In addition to having to consume and digest just a whole bunch of fictional lore that doesn't benefit me in any other way. Anyhow, those are my 2 cents on that. That's why I've been reading the Witchy series and doing this 5-minute stuff on the Substack. Once I'm done with all these Witchy books, and there are 4 of them, I'm going to start digging through my Herodotus book that my brother got me all those years ago. Once I finish Herodotus, I'll allow myself to go buy Thucydides and Xenophon and do the same thing. But I'm enjoying reading and digesting and sharing this way. Hope you guys are too. Thanks for listening. Drive safe. See you out there.